One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition. It is June 27th, 2013. And tonight I have a special treat for you all. We're going to be going back in time tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be going back in time well over 10 years to an interview a host / friend of mine named Len Osanic did with a witness to the RFK assassination, who at the time he was about 15 years old, and he actually was there taking photographs, and they confiscated his pictures because his pictures would have showed the entire thing, everything that had happened. He caught on film, so of course they confiscated his photos. But it's an interesting tale in the RFK assassination, and the witness, his name is Scott Enyart. He's not really into doing interviews anymore, and luckily Len interviewed him years and years ago, and I've had Len on my broadcast a few times. I'll have to get him back on for the Unbound listeners, because I don't think I've had him on since I moved over here to Unbound. But you can go back in my archives over on federaljack.com and listen to the shows I've done with Len on the JFK assassination, and on Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. But he gave me permission months and months and months ago to play this interview with Scott that he did years ago. And I just haven't had a chance, because you know how things are. I mean, here in bizarro crazy world, one day after another lately, it's been one thing after another. And tonight I actually, I know everybody's been covering the NSA stuff, and I've been going over all the other craziness that's been going on, but I wanted to, let's shift gears from all the craziness. Let's go back in time. Let's go back to the conspiracy roots, I guess you could say, and let's look at the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. And I guarantee you, if you don't know anything about it, well, at least you'll walk away with some wonderment after listening to this interview. Remember, Scott was 15 at the time and a witness to this. So stay tuned. It's an old interview that Len gave me permission to bring out of the closet for you all. So stay tuned tonight. We're going back in time, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So as I air the interview tonight, coming in and out of break, like going to break, I'll pause it and I'll let you know we're going to the break. But coming back in for time purposes, because I want to be able to fit in as much as I can, I'll let the music fade down. And then as the music fades down, I will pick up with the interview, because it's important that you all get a chance to hear as much of the interview in its entirety as you possibly can. Yeah, you're going to end up missing like 15 minutes of it. But you can go over to blackopradio.com. That's Len Osanic's website, and you can purchase his archives from all of his radio shows. And he's done a lot of great stuff. I suggest you at least get the L. Fletcher Prouty archives. I'm going to email Len and get him back on again for you all who don't know who he is, and for the new listeners here at Unbound. But anyway, I want to air this interview for you again. We're going back in time, and if I remember correctly, this interview was done like around 2000, 2001. So, and I asked Len about getting in touch with Scott, and he said Scott's not really into doing interviews anymore. So that's why I asked him, well, then can I air this? Do you mind? And Len's such a good guy; he wants to get the information out there. He has no issue with it. So for the rest of the evening, I'm going to be airing Len's last interview, again, going back to like 2000, 2001, with RFK assassination witness and, I guess, amateur photographer, because he was like 15 at the time, but that he was doing photography, I think, if I remember correctly, in the documentary about him. He was doing it for like 2 years at the time. It wasn't about him, it was about the assassination. But I digress. Anyway, RFK assassination witness and amateur photographer Scott Enyart. Here we go.
And now your hosts, Anita Langley and Len Osanic.
Hello, Anita. Good evening.
Hi, Ren.
Another show. Is this show 12?
Yes, it is.
Great. Tonight we're privileged to have Mr. Jamie Scott Enyart, and he was in the Ambassador Hotel the night that Robert Kennedy was assassinated. And we're just going to try to get him on the line now. Scott, are you there?
Hi, Len.
Great. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good.
And our co-host, Anita?
Hi.
Hi, Anita. How are you?
Great. Great to have you here.
Good. Glad to be here.
Let's just go back and just give listeners a brief overview. When Robert Kennedy was in the Ambassador Hotel, you were a young photographer there taking pictures. You ended up in the pantry?
Well, yeah, I was 15 years old. I was on my high school paper, and I was assigned to photograph the victory speech of Robert F. Kennedy, as well as I was campaigning for Robert F. Kennedy out of his campaign headquarters here on Wilshire Boulevard. So I was, familiar with the candidate. I had met him before, and I was very familiar with the Ambassador Hotel because I had spent a lot of time there swimming in the swimming pool there with a friend of mine who I went down there with, who belonged to a club there. It was called the Sun Club. It was like an athletic club. So I used to hang around, and I knew my way in and out and all the, different rooms and all the, doors and everything around the Ambassador Hotel. So we made sure to find out exactly where Kennedy would be. We were up in his room before he came down. We knew where the pantry was, and we were prepared to, sneak into the embassy room if we had to. It ended up that we got press passes, so we had full access to it.
Oh, so did you get to meet him beforehand?
I had met him the day before when he was walking around on the grounds there at the Ambassador. Access to it.
Oh, so did you get to meet him beforehand?
We would say hi to him. He was staying down at the beach at John Frankenheimer's house, and then they would have rooms there at the Ambassador Hotel sort of for official functions and things. So he would come there during the day and do things. His kids would swim in the pool and stuff, and then they would go back to the Frankenheimer house. John Frankenheimer dropped him off at the hotel, in fact, for this event, for the speech at around 5:30, I think.
Right, and then he would have what you would call a hospitality suite.
That's right. They had 3 rooms up on the 6th floor. They had 2 adjoining suites and then a room across the hall. And across the hall, they were set up with like an interview room. They had lights in there and everything. And so ABC News, and there were a lot of reporters that were assigned to him for the campaign. And so he would pop in and out back and forth across the room. And so we went upstairs. We took the fire escape stairs up. We knew what room he was in, and we would hang out in the hallway. And when he would walk back and forth, we would say hi to him or something, and just sort of poke our heads in the room. It was a very friendly atmosphere. It was there was no Secret Service at the time. There was a little bit of private security. You had a few guys that sort of took care of him, Rosie Greer kind of thing. People who would move people out of the way, but there was no official bodyguard sort of situation for the Kennedys.
Yeah, so it was probably exciting to meet him then.
It was very exciting. You know, for me, it was an opportunity. I wanted to be, you know, the big press photographer, and all the big photographers were there. There were about 200 photographers from all around the world, big guys from Life magazine, Bill Epridge, people like that. And so, you know, I had a press pass on. You know, we could go anywhere. We'd go in the press room. We'd go backstage, you know, and you know, mingle with these guys and, you know, ask for, you know, tips and advice and stuff and watch what they were doing. And so after we saw Kennedy upstairs, we went downstairs, and Kennedy was involved in 3 primaries. It was the California primary and then 2 others. And so they were waiting for the returns to come in on the other primaries, even though it appeared he had won in California. So he didn't come downstairs until after midnight. And we arrived there around 6 or 7 o'clock. So we were all over the hotel, and then finally, starting at around 10 o'clock, I took up position right in front of the podium, about 5 feet back from right in front of the podium, and just held my ground there until he came down at about a little after 12 o'clock.
Then they had announced that he had in fact won.
Right. They announced that he had won. They brought him on stage. They brought his wife up on stage with him. He gave a speech, you know, very exciting, everybody cheering and everything, and very casual speech. And I was impressed with how he didn't sit there and read some scripted thing. You know, he related to the audience. He spoke about all the people, Cesar Chavez on stage with him, Paul Schrade from the United Auto Workers Union, and so he referred to everyone, was very comfortable with everybody, and then time came to leave the stage, and normally they would have gone off to stage left out to a doorway out to the parking lot. They were supposed to go off to an event at a nightclub called The Factory in West Hollywood for a victory party. And what happened, because Kennedy came on stage so late, he was advised by someone on stage not to go out into the parking lot, but to come back through and go into the press room where the radio guys were, because if he didn't go back and talk to the radio people and the print press people, he wouldn't make the morning papers. Because he had come down so late, everyone was behind schedule. So as he left stage, he went off to the right to go back to the press room instead of leaving the auditorium. And that's really what, sealed his fate. Had he gone out the other way, he would have missed Sirhan entirely. So he went off stage and went off to what would be stage right. All of the press photographers and all of the film photographers, and, you know, there was no videotape back then, so there was no cameras running. They all went off, packed up their equipment, and were headed for their cars. Because I didn't have the same kind of deadline, I followed the candidate and went backstage through these 2 doors where you go back to the kitchen area, and I followed Bobby Kennedy back into the pantry area, and was photographing him along the way as we went. And so that's when, you know, everything broke loose. I was about 10 feet behind him taking pictures, and he was being escorted by a security guard, Eugene Thane Caesar, who was holding his arm. And as he was walking through and had his back to me and I was photographing, all of a sudden there were all these popping noises, and, you know, people were stomping on balloons and everything, and I had no idea what gunfire sounded like. I was 15 years old.
Now, I hate to interrupt you, so I'll just try to do this politely. First of all, you said that he was led by a security guard?
Yeah, there was a security guard, Eugene Thane Caesar. There were a couple of off-duty guys from Lockheed who were private security force who were brought in. There were no police there. And so to help him get through the crowd, this guy, Eugene Thane Caesar, was holding him by his right elbow and sort of escorting him through the pantry, sort of clearing people out of the way. And there was Rosie Greer, who was in front of him, kind of pushing the crowd out of the way. But Bobby Kennedy stopped there in the pantry area. There were all of these Hispanic Mexican workers who were working in the kitchen who couldn't come out and hear the speech. And Bobby Kennedy stopped and spoke to all these people and started shaking hands and things. And I remember being impressed with the fact that, you know, he would stop, and after, you know, this long evening here when he could go off and party with his friends, he was spending time talking with these people who he obviously was concerned with, you know, being involved in the political process.
I mean, for those of us who've looked into it, we know the name thing, Eugene Caesar. But I was not aware that that's who escorted him.
Yeah, he was holding him by the hand, by the elbow, and moving along in the crowd. And in fact, when Kennedy was shot and finally ended up on the ground, he was holding Eugene Thane Caesar's tie in his hand. It was a clip-on tie, and he had ripped it off. He had grabbed hold of his tie on his way falling to the ground and was holding it in his hand as he fell to the ground.
Yeah, right. Now, at what point were you taking photos? Right when this was happening?
Yeah, I was taking photos as they were walking. I saw him, you know, in silhouette, and he would turn from side to side shaking hands, and I was getting him at his profile as he was shaking hands. And then he turned one time to the left and was shaking hands. I remember all of a sudden he just dropped from the frame. He just fell. And so I followed him down, and there was all this chaos. I took a few pictures, and then people started falling backwards on top of me. In fact, Paul Schrade fell backwards and knocked me down. He was shot in the forehead. And as I fell backwards, I got up and jumped up on a table, which was in the corner of the pantry, and I continued taking pictures of everything that was taking place down there where Kennedy fell. But I thought he had slipped and fallen, or I thought he had fainted. I had not related to the fact that he had actually been shot at that time. Once I was up on the table and people started screaming and there were other victims, I've been shot, it became very evident that it was much worse than it was.
That's astounding, because for those of us who may not feel that Sirhan fired fatal shots, that means that everyone behind him, and you had clear photos of that.
That's correct.
And more than one. A series of photos you were taking up to there. Approximately how many do you think you took?
It took about 18 to 20 pictures in the pantry area.
18 to 20 in the pantry?
Yeah, so during the actual shooting, there's probably 4 to 6 pictures as he's falling, and then the rest of them in the chaos afterwards as people are scrambling and moving around. And
at what time frame would you say from when you first noticed Kennedy falling to when the shooting stopped? How long would that interval be?
The actual shooting probably took place in a period of just a few seconds. It was very rapid, and I know that people immediately jumped. I mean, there's no doubt that Sirhan walked in that room with a gun and emptied it in the general direction of Bobby Kennedy. Whether or not he had blanks in the gun, whether or not any of his shots hit Bobby Kennedy, you can argue about, but there's no doubt, and there are a lot of witnesses, he came in there, he pulled his gun out, and he fired. The problem is that he was standing in front of Bobby Kennedy the entire time and about 3 feet away from him at waist level when all of the shots that killed Bobby Kennedy were point blank behind his ear, to his neck, and to his back. And that's where Eugene Thane Caesar was standing. And Eugene Thane Caesar pulled his weapon, and that's an interesting thing about once I was up on the table and all of this chaos took place, what I saw is I never saw Caesar pull his gun out and shoot Kennedy, but I did see him get up and his weapon was already out. And so he had drawn his weapon at some point, and so whether or not he accidentally shot Bobby Kennedy trying to return fire and kill Sirhan, or whether he intended to assassinate Bobby Kennedy, nobody could tell at this point. But we do know that there was more than one gun in that pantry. We know by the bullet count, the official bullet count from the LAPD and the FBI, which is, anywhere from 10 to 14 bullets. Well, that's, more than 8, and there were only 8 bullets in Sirhan's gun. The bullet that came out of Bobby Kennedy's head could never be identified as having come from Sirhan's gun. So we know that the bullet that killed Bobby Kennedy cannot be tied to Sirhan's gun, either in caliber and weight, nor in position in how it was fired in the pantry that night.
Right, due to the powder burns on the back of his head.
That's right.
And,
it was a contact wound. And Sirhan was nowhere tall enough and nowhere near enough to Bobby Kennedy at that time to get in that position.
And this is astounding information because, like you say, if anyone looks into it, they find that the police recovered up to 14 possible bullets.
That's correct.
And then, when they take out the ceiling tiles and the frame of the doorway and whatnot, where the bullets were lodged in, these things have subsequently been destroyed.
That's right. And the bullet that there's one bullet that was supposedly in pretty good shape that they could have tested, was recently checked up at the archives, and it's been covered in grease. And once it's been covered in grease, you can no longer test fire the bullet.
Isn't that convenient? Isn't that convenient? I'm going to pause it right there. Remember, when we come back, as soon as the bumper music ramps down, I'll pick it up right where we're leaving off. Don't go anywhere. Let's get right back into it. This is an interview with Scott Enyart, witness to the Bobby Kennedy assassination. He was right in the pantry taking photos when it happened. Here we go.
And the bullet that there's one bullet that was supposedly in pretty good shape that they could have tested, was recently checked up at the archives, and it's been covered in grease. And once it's been covered in grease, you can no longer test fire the bullet. So the bullets have been moved, they've been altered. The evidence at the archives we proved during our trial, they changed evidence numbers, they took my photographs. and evidence numbers 24 and 25, which once held a bullet and a shell casing, now all of a sudden were a proof sheet and a roll of film. So there's been all kinds of fooling around up there at the archives from the LAPD and the FBI, which came out in our trial, and the evidence has just been altered and changed in so many ways, and that trail of evidence has been so poor in terms of who touched what and who signed off on what, that the police have pretty much made sure that nobody can come to any conclusion other than the one that they came to, which was, that Sirhan was their sole assailant.
Yeah, but this destruction of evidence is it goes past the word malicious. It's like the Warren Commission. You can't say that they've made mistakes. They have purposely.
They dry cleaned Bobby Kennedy's suit. Yeah. Before trial. They took the wood door panels where bullets were fired and destroyed them because they said they wouldn't fit in a file cabinet. Yeah, this is the kind of excuses that they're giving. They burned 2,400 photographs 3 weeks before Sirhan's trial in a hospital incinerator.
How many was that again?
2,400 photographs.
Right, and I think somebody said that was a stack about 1.5 feet tall.
Exactly, of photographs, and they had no ID numbers. There were no recording of these photographs. And we put these police officers on the stand. Not only did they acknowledge doing this, but they said they did this on a regular basis. And so this is destroying photographic evidence before Sirhan even goes to trial with evidence that hasn't even been logged in an official way.
So then would you say that, from what you're saying, then I guess you would say that this is a normal way that the police treat evidence?
Well, when you talk about conspiracies, because my trial was never about any conspiracy, otherwise we never would have gotten to court, we kept it as a simple property case. The police department took my film, they didn't give it back, and so either replace it or pay for it. That's how we were successful in the courts. In terms of a conspiracy, you can be part of a conspiracy without knowing you are part of that conspiracy. People can operate in a way because they're given orders in which fulfill the needs of a conspiracy without them consciously going, hey, I'm a conspirator and I'm trying to do this to, upset the government or whatever. And I think a lot of that took place in this case. There was this rush to judgment. You have to consider that we had Martin Luther King killed. We had John F. Kennedy killed. And so the order came down in this Bobby Kennedy shooting from Washington, from the FBI, within moments of the assassination, that we don't want another Dallas. And so they wanted to make sure, the LAPD, that they said, well, look, we caught the guy, we got him with his gun, collect all the evidence that said this guy did it, and let's just get this guy to trial and get him into a jail cell, and we've done our job. And so they destroyed everything that didn't point directly to Sirhan having done it. And so they weren't so much malicious in what they were doing. They were really convinced they had the right guy. But in the process, they destroyed all this evidence of all these outside influences that would have told us why Sirhan was there and whether or not there were other guns or any other thing involved in this, and whether it was much a larger thing than just one, crazed Jordanian immigrant with a grudge.
Yeah, but I wouldn't hold that opinion. I would, from what I understand from Operation Senator and testimony from some of the cross-examination of witnesses and how they browbeat people, I would say that there was several insiders that, like you say, were using people that may not have been known they were used, but this was an operation, a covert operation, which was rampant in, I think, L.A.
Right. I'm just saying at the level that I was operating, and at the level that we kept our trial and everything, we stayed away from all of that. And that's the only way we were able to get through the court.
I'm going to pause it right there. And Scott brings up a good point. If they had even raised the idea of conspiracy, that it never would have even gotten into the court system at the time. So they raise it as a property case. Evidence just disappears all the time. Apparently, that's standard operating procedure for the LAPD. Now, fast forward to what we know about things going on to this very day. Is that a big surprise? We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Getting right back into it where we left off. Nice long segment. Picking up Scott Enyart. Again, he was 15 at the time, witness to the assassination of presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy. He was right there taking photos, and him and Len were talking about his lawsuit against the LAPD to get his photos back, and he found out during the lawsuit that it was standard operating procedure for them to actually get rid of photos. I mean, hey, you know, why keep evidence? Let's just shred it. No, that's not shady at all. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a rant. I want to get right back into it for time's sake. Here we go, going back in time again with RFK assassination witness Scott Enyart.
This was an operation, a covert operation, which was rampant in, I think, L.A.
Right. I'm just saying at the level that I was operating and at the level that we kept our trial and everything, we stayed away from all of that. And that's the only way we were able to get through the courts. Had we raised these issues like you're talking about, they would have said, oh, they're crazy conspiracy, let's get them out of here. So we used basically their own tactics, clean police work to bring this thing forward and expose enough of it. And so we were able to get into trial in 7 weeks of trial, put these people on the stand who had never been on the stand before, and like you say, willing or unwilling participants in a conspiracy, and get them to lay this story out and put it into the public record.
Right. So let's talk about your trial now. When did you first take the police to trial?
Well, what happened was I was taken at gunpoint at the hotel. Someone had told the police that I was taking pictures during the actual shooting, a woman named Joan Barr. There's a police report filed. So I was taken by police. I was held at the hotel. I was transferred to Rampart Station and questioned. My film and my camera were taken. And then they told me that my film was sealed for 20 years, that it was used as evidence in Sirhan's trial, and that I could not get to it until 1988. Well, in 1988, I waited all that time, and then I wrote letters and officially asked for my film back. One of the first things we found out was that there was no 20-year sealing of the evidence. That was just the LAPD saying that there was because they didn't want anyone to go near it. But no judge, no government body had officially sealed this evidence. The LAPD just decided that the public and the press shouldn't be able to look at this. So in 1988, everything was transferred to the California State Archives, and so through my letters, the archives were searched, and as a result of that, I got a letter from the California State Archives from the chief archivist, Mr. Metzer, stating that my photographs, not only were they not there, but that it was the opinion of the California State Archives that the police had burned and destroyed my film along with these 2,400 other photographs that were destroyed at the time. So it was then that I took legal action and actually sued the LAPD, the state of California, and whatever FBI, whatever entities we had to sue in order to get them to produce the records and produce the witnesses to discover where my film was.
And this is 1988?
1988. So we wound through the courts, through the appeals courts. We were thrown out on statute of limitations. They said you waited too long. Well, we waited 20 years because we thought the film was there. So we were reinstated by the courts so that our trial could go through. We didn't go to trial until 1996.
I have a quick question. Did you have that in writing then from the LA police that there was a 20-year limit on it?
No, they never admitted that. It was admitted in court, so it's in our court records, but the LAPD has never admitted to that fact other than on the stand.
Right, and to back up further 1 second, when you were detained and your film was confiscated, what would you describe that treatment like?
I was treated very well. I was taken along with, Rosie Greer and George Plimpton, a lot of other witnesses who were there in the pantry. The police treated us, actually very well. I was 15 years old. I was all shook up and scared. At that age, the police department was my friend, in every aspect of my life. I'd never had bad dealings with them or anything. And so they were very comforting to me, and we're going to take care of you. And they called my parents and everything, and they questioned me at great length, and they gave me back my camera and said, hey, we're going to take care of your film and everything. And then I went on my way. It was after that point when I came back to the LAPD even the following morning and said, gee, I'd like a receipt for the fact that you took my film. And it was the following day that I noticed things were a little bit strange when they said, we had absolutely no record of you ever being here. And that continued on through that 20-year period where, they were less and less likely to return my phone calls. And, it came from, oh yeah, Scott, we remember you, to, we don't know who you are after 20 years. And that's why we ended up filing the lawsuit, because of the way we were being treated.
And was that always by a certain spokesman? Did you talk to several policemen? Or
well, I spoke specifically with the police officers who took me into custody, and then specifically with the detectives of Special Unit Senator. And most of those guys retired along the way there. So by the time we got to the 20 years out, I was talking to absolute strangers and whoever the political officials happened to be who were in charge of getting rid of this, which ended up being the city attorney's office. And that's where things started to get ugly when the city attorney's office, not only the people who were working in that office started, sort of ignoring us, but they then hired an outside law firm, this guy Skip Miller out of Century City, which they paid, over $1 million to basically just get rid of our case, and that's when things started turning ugly.
Oh, hold it. So they paid an outside attorney?
Yes.
Not the city attorney?
That's right, and the city attorney's office has over, 200 and some odd lawyers. Apparently none of them were good enough to fight this simple property case. So they hired this guy, Skip Miller, who is Mayor Reardon's personal attorney. He got the Rodney King cops off on their trial, on their federal trial. He got Nate Holden, city councilman here, off on sexual harassment charges. He got Michael Jackson out of his child molestation charges, bought his way out of that. This guy's, a real wheeler dealer and charges big bucks. And so they've spent, well over $1 million during our trial, close to $2 million now going into a second trial, in trying to attack us. And basically it turned from trying to find my film to personal attacks on me, and my integrity and what I do for a living, and me as a human being. And it got very ugly.
Oh, I can't believe that. $1 million. Okay, so we're in 1988.
Right.
And you're taking your first case. Who did you subpoena?
We brought in Thomas Noguchi. We brought in Ted Chirac, who's sort of the great granddaddy of conspiracy theories. We brought in, my father, photographic experts, absolutely everybody that was pertinent to this case. We even brought in Bernard Parks because he was an assistant deputy at the time, and the judge refused to allow him in. Half the LAPD brass showed up on the day Bernard Parks was supposed to be on the stand. No one knew that he was going to be our new police chief. Of course, they knew within the government that this guy was up, and it would look bad for him to be on the stand and have to expose any secrets. So they moved, mountains to make sure that Bernard Parks was not put on the stand during our trial. There was a tremendous amount of political influence that went along with this. And the city, what they didn't realize is they thought this was a simple property case and that they were going to, just be able to crush me and get rid of me. And we were very well prepared for this trial and had all the research. The problem is when they hired this guy, Skip Miller, out of Century City, he knew nothing about photography. He knew nothing about the Robert F. Kennedy assassination. And they claimed at the beginning of the trial that there was no way we were going to talk about what took place during the assassination that night. All they were going to talk about was what happened to the film afterward. And every witness that we put on, we were able to bring out everything that happened that night during the Kennedy trial. Paul Schrade testified for us. He was shot in the forehead during this whole unfortunate thing. So we had a lot of people who were there that night. Ted Chirac, who brought to life exactly what happened in that pantry. The opposition brought in Bill Epperidge, lifetime photographer, Benson, photographer from...
So, okay, you're going very quick. I've got to slow you down a bit. You subpoenaed these people. Did you bring in any of the detectives that did interview you that night? Yes,
we brought in two of the detectives who were there.
So they were still on duty, or they retired?
No, they were retired. Shields was one of them, and these are the guys that we put on the stand, and they admitted that they took me into custody. They basically admitted everything all the way down the line.
So they confirmed what happened?
Exactly. All they did was confirm what happened. We had so many documents out of the California archives that the LAPD had turned over, and part of the problem was during the trial was if we couldn't produce the officer who signed these documents, the other side would claim, well, that's how do we know that's from the LAPD? Well, the LAPD put it in the California State Archives and said it was from the LAPD. But we had to actually bring in the people who signed the documents, many of whom were retired or dead, in order to bring that in. So they stripped our case early on of documents that stated he was in the pantry, he was on the table, he was taking pictures during the shooting. A lot of that never got to the jury. We had to prove that through other means. But fortunately, we had the actual tape recording of my interview with police. And we got that from the California State Archives, and on that taped interview, I draw a map for the detectives as to where I went, where I was, and what I was photographing the entire time. And once the jury heard that, and that was confirmed by the officers who were there, that's pretty much what sealed the fate and why we won that jury trial.
Okay, so that was in 1988?
That was in 1996 that the trial took place.
Oh, so it took several years?
20 years for us to get to...
no, but when you first started in 1988, it took another 8 years or whatever.
That's right. 96
so in 96,
we finally got to trial.
You got a jury trial.
We got a jury trial, and we won that jury verdict. We won over $500,000 from the city.
So, okay, can you tell me a little more about the final verdict on this one?
Well, the final verdict, they found that the LAPD had altered and changed evidence, and that they had not been honest, and that the value of this film was tremendous, and that the other thing that was interesting was that during trial, just before trial, they claimed that they found my film. They claimed that at the California State Archives they found my film. Now, they went up there on their own. They took a police officer with them who was with me the night of the assassination, and all of a sudden they claim, we've got a roll of film here that's Scott Enyart's, and we've got a piece of paper here signed by the police officer who took him into custody, that, a police report that claims that this is his film. And so we insisted that these documents be brought, and this film be brought to court for us to examine. Well, it was brought to court, and on the way to the courthouse, the courier was robbed. He was robbed just out of LAPD jurisdiction out there by the airport, and this poor courier was sitting in his car, and all of a sudden some guy, slashes the tires of his car. He pulls over. They reach in the back, and they steal the briefcase with the film and the evidence in it, and this guy shows up at court with nothing. So they conveniently created film. They brought it down to court, and when it came time to get it to court, it conveniently disappeared.
Wasn't this the second attempt to bring the film to court?
And this was the second attempt that they had to bring it to court. The first time they attempted to bring it to court, the courier brought it in, the police courier, and the package had been opened and examined. And so the judge said, this is spoiled evidence, send it back. And so they sent it back to the California State Archives. It was re-inventoried, and it was sealed again. And the second time it came out, and the second time it was stolen on its way to court. It's just ridiculous. And then we put this officer on the stand and presented this document to him that he had signed. And we asked him, well, when did you sign it? He said, well, I don't remember. And we said, well, did you sign it, 20 years ago, or did you sign it yesterday? And he could not remember. He just wouldn't talk.
You mentioned Skip Miller before and all his connections. Now, I understand, perhaps you could correct me if I'm wrong, that he placed a call to find out what car company...
Oh, yeah, his office called that courier company. They wanted to know when the courier was arriving, what car he was renting, what color the car was, and what the route was that he was taking to the courthouse. So, the suspicious stuff just goes back, incredibly, toward Miller and his boys.
I've got to cut you off here for a second. Can you go over that again?
Yeah.
How did you find that out?
We put the courier on the stand, and we deposed him on videotape and played it for the jury. And they stated that Skip Miller's office called the morning the package was supposed to arrive, and they wanted to know what time the flight arrived. They wanted a description of the courier, and they wanted to know what car he was renting and what color the car was.
What color the car was?
Yeah, what route he was taking from the airport to the courthouse, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's not shady. That's not shady at all. No. Now, what would they need that information for? And then the guy just happens to get robbed after this information is given? And there's no such thing as a conspiracy? Right. Stay tuned. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Final segment, the first hour. I'm going to finish up here. There's about a minute and a half left with this one piece, and then I'll move on to the next section of the interview. It's a three-part one. I have to load up each part, but let me finish up the last piece here. You're going to, and we left off. You're going to hear him talking about Skip Miller, an attorney for the city. His office, the one who's defending the city, I guess you could say, in this whole thing. His office calls up the courier service to find out make, model, car, the courier, and everything else that's bringing the photographs that Scott has, or excuse me, that he took, that the police have, to the court. And you heard the first time the package was opened, the judge sent it back. They send this one out, and the courier gets robbed. And this guy's office, Skip Miller's office, wanted to know the exact details, the route, the kind of car. And then the guy gets robbed. And no, that's not shady. So here, let's finish up with that, and we'll move on to the next section.
Put the courier on the stand, and we deposed him on videotape and played it for the jury. And they stated that Skip Miller's office called the morning the package was supposed to arrive, and they wanted to know what time the flight arrived. They wanted the description of the courier, and they wanted to know what car he was renting and what color the car was.
What
and
color the car was?
Yeah, what route he was taking from the airport to the courthouse, which is just ridiculous.
That's beyond unbelievable.
Yeah, we talked to the courier, the owner of the courier service, and he says, in 25 years of delivering packages, he says, the only questions I ever get are, when's it going to get here and how much is it going to cost? Nobody asked me what the route is or what color the car is. And so this was tremendously suspicious, and of course it took place in Culver City outside of LAPD jurisdiction, so we couldn't say it was LAPD cops. And, same thing happened when we went to appeal. When time came to appeal this, all of a sudden the entire clerk's record disappeared from the courthouse. It was stolen. The entire record, the clerk's record of our trial, had been stolen from the courthouse. And so this had to be reconstructed through attorney's notes and things like this for the appeal process. So, they've been playing fast and loose with the facts through this whole process.
Now, does anybody not see that there's a conspiracy here? Two or more people getting together to do something bad. How does evidence get stolen from a courthouse? From a courthouse. Not only evidence, but literally the stenographer's notes. Are you kidding me? The court clerk? The notes? Yeah, no, there's nothing shady. No, nothing shady there. Pay no attention to what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, there's a conspiracy going on. By definition, there has to be a conspiracy going on. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would they go to the lengths that they're going to hide a bunch of photographs that a 15-year-old amateur photographer took in the basement, in the pantry there? We must ask ourselves that. Perhaps we should look into the assassination of Bobby Kennedy a little further. Most people have no idea who Bobby Kennedy even is, which is really unfortunate. They have absolutely no idea who Bobby Kennedy is. I could say RFK, and they go, who? And if some of them might know, Bobby, when he was younger, he was kind of a prick. But in the years that I'll say he grew up, had a new awakening after his brother was killed, he became a different man. You can see there's pre-assassination and post-assassination Bobby Kennedy. Two totally different people. He knew that they killed his brother. One of the things he was going to do was stop the war. Another thing he was going to do was actually start taking care of human rights, not this group's rights or that group's rights. Everybody, human rights, which is what the one thing that the powers that shouldn't be don't want you to focus on. He was going to stop the war in Vietnam, and he was going to reopen the investigation into his brother's murder. No, no, and no, sir, you're not allowed to do that. And there's, I don't want to say the term rumor or speculation, but I guess we'll say there's, rumor has it, we'll use the term, rumor has it that him and MLK were going to get together, president, vice president, team. Can you imagine that ticket? Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy. They would have been swept into the White House. And there were people that were concerned that they were communists. Which is crap. But just an excuse to say, well, that's a good reason why we killed them. But the point is, that would have been a ticket that could not have been defeated. They would have, they would have had to literally pull off, like, opening your face voting fraud. Horribly, like, in your face, so bad it would have been exposed. All right, we're going to break. Hour number 1 up, hour number 2 coming up. Do not go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we will continue with assassination witness Scott Enyart. Witness to the assassination of presidential candidate Robert Kennedy. Do not go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. It is June 27th, 2013, and here on tonight's edition, I am doing a special broadcast for you all. I'm airing an old interview that a friend and fellow radio show host and researcher, Len Osanic, some of you might know who he is. He's a host who runs Black Op Radio. He also is the webmaster and genius behind Prouty.org, the man who got the chance to sit down and know and befriend Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty in his final years. And I suggest you go over to his websites and get his archive stuff, at least get the stuff, the interviews with Prouty. You want to talk about insider knowledge on how the CIA works, the Cold War, which you could learn a lot about what's going on today from. Remember, history repeats itself. And these are some of the same people are still around, and if not, their proteges are around and in charge. So we should learn what they're up to and what they've done in the past and how things operate. Unfortunately, Colonel Prouty is no longer with us. So the only way to actually go check out his work is to go check it out over on Prouty, PROUTY.org, or go over to blackopradio.com, which is Len's website. And you can actually get all of his old interviews, his old shows, his newer stuff that he's done, everything he's got there you can purchase. And you know, it's not that expensive. Support him. Get the stuff. You can get the full interview. You're only going to be able to hear about 3/4 of the Scott Enyart interview here tonight, but you can hear the full thing, the full interview over on Len's website. Just go, purchase the archives. Look, you know what? Len doesn't pay me anything or to say that. I'm doing that, and I'm plugging his stuff really quick because he's the one that, very long time ago, gave me permission to air this stuff for you all. And I think it's important that you guys hear this stuff. I'm still trying to get Scott to interview him, but he's, like I said, in hour 1, he's not, he just doesn't feel like doing interviews anymore. And that's to each their own. I don't want to push anybody, but luckily Len was able to do a good interview with him, and I want to air that information so you all can hear it, because this is important. I mean, here this is an amateur photographer, someone that was there, and you look at the lengths that the government went through, the things that he went through just to get his pictures back from photos that he took while he was in the pantry. Now, you go, well, I mean, who cares? They're just photos, Popeye. Well, obviously, if he was in the pantry and they're photos of what was going on in the pantry, then you have to look at, okay, well, now we know what they were. I wonder why the government was so quick to want to get those photos in the first place, and then reluctant to give them back. And then when they're supposed to go to the courthouse, they're opened, and the judge says, nope, chain of evidence, or chain of custody, rather, is been compromised, no good, send it back. They send it back, they reseal it, and then the attorney that's working for the city on the case calls up, his office calls up the company, the courier company, and wants to know the make, model of the car, what the driver looks like, the route it's going to be traveling, everything, the color of the car, and then it gets robbed. The courier gets robbed on the way to the courthouse. But no, there's nothing strange going on here. Back to sleep, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing strange going on here. And again, it's the LAPD. And that's not the only evidence they lost. You need to go research the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. We're doing more broadcasts on this again to bring this back up to the light again. We're going to break. Stay tuned. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Let's get right back into it. RFK Assassination witness Scott Enyart. Here we go.
Another thing that happened was during jury deliberations, Skip Miller contacted the jury foreman, took him to his office, and took a statement from him while this guy's an impaneled juror during deliberations.
Isn't that strictly forbidden?
It's strictly forbidden, and Skip Miller was then taken before the California State Bar. He was charged with this crime. He was found guilty of it. His defense was that, he had the First Amendment. He had the right to talk to anybody that he wanted to. Then he blamed it on an associate. He claimed that another lawyer in his office had looked up the wrong statute and given him the wrong information, and that associate was, since then, has been made full partner in his law firm. If someone had actually caused Skip Miller to jeopardize his license, he would have been found, dead in the parking lot of that law firm. But instead, this guy's promoted to full partner. So Skip Miller was found guilty by the California State Bar of what amounts to jury tampering, illegal contact with a juror. And so it was just outrageous. And his punishment was, originally the prosecution wanted to take his license for at least 2 months. And he negotiated a deal, because he's Mr. Hotshot. He ended up with 1 day of ethics training class was his punishment for contacting a juror during deliberations during a trial.
Again, unbelievable.
It's just outrageous, the abuse of power. It's just truly offensive the way this thing has gone down.
You're one of our quickest speaking guests, so I've got to keep backing you up.
Sure.
So pardon me about that. Now, you mentioned the word appeal. So the first trial, the jury found in your favor.
First trial, jury found in our favor. They were found guilty, I believe it was on 14 different counts. And so we were awarded over $500,000 from the city. And basically, since supposedly this film had been destroyed, there was nothing for them to hand over or anything like that. And so we just waited. We went into the appeals process. City spending more and more, hundreds of thousands of dollars of city money.
Well, what you're saying is the city appealed the decision then?
That's right. City appealed the decision.
They didn't want to pay.
They didn't want to pay. That's right. And so, despite the fact that they'd spent, 2-3 times that in court, what the judgment was, they were not going to pay me one dime. And so we went into the appeals process, and in the appeals process, they used the fact that they claimed that the jurors had preconceived notions about the LAPD. One of the jurors had mentioned that the members of the LAPD have, routinely taken advantage of people in the minority community in terms of falsifying evidence, which ends up being true out of Rampart Station, which is where I was taken, in fact. And so the appeals court overturned our decision based on juror misconduct. Juror misconduct, which was inspired by Skip Miller contacting the jury.
So they overturned your award.
That's right.
On juror misconduct when he had been charged. Had he been charged?
That's right. He had been charged.
He had been charged and found guilty. 1 day.
He had been charged and found guilty of illegal contact with the jury.
And I haven't heard a word of this in the news.
That's right. That's right. It was all buried. Nothing came out. And so we're now facing our second trial. And so we're in preparation now to go back into court and fight this battle again. And so that's the decision that I have to make right now as to whether or not I want to go back into another 7 weeks of trial, and the kind of abuse that we've been put through, and the stress on my family and finances and everything. And so, they've been talking about, settling out of court, and there are negotiations going back and forth, but it's the same old dirty tricks, the same old, ugly, trying to silence me, well, if we settle, then you can't talk about it, this kind of thing. And so, we're back up there for round 2.
Sounds like quite a fight you've got on your hands.
Yeah, and, you're talking about 30 years out of my life here. It's something that, I really didn't want to do. I just wanted my film back. At every step of the way, I turned to my attorneys and I go, I don't want to go to court. I don't want to do this. And they kept going, hey, we're winning. We keep winning. You can't back out now. And if we hadn't won at every stage of it, I would have walked away a long time ago. But it just became so offensive the way that we were being treated. Originally, it was about getting my film back. Then it became, how can you treat me as a citizen here? I come voluntarily and give you my film, shut up about it for 20 years, go ahead and use it, don't ask for anything, don't ask for anything back, just return my film. And instead of saying, hey, let's go look for it, and, thank you, you're a good citizen, they started attacking me and my character, and I was forced to see a psychiatrist before trial. They claimed that I was, they went through my school records and claimed that I was, a liar and basically a liar and a thief.
I got to cut you off here. So they were attacking you personally?
Oh yeah.
What kind of questioning would be brought on?
I was forced to see a psychiatrist. They claimed that because of it took me a long time to learn how to read in elementary school or something, that I couldn't tell time and I was some perpetual liar, and so my testimony couldn't be trusted. I had to see a psychiatrist and was forced to take all kinds of sort of humiliating, insulting examinations. Do you hate your father? Did your dad kill your puppy when you were a kid? Type questions over and over again before trial. Now, of course, this was all thrown out by the judge, but I still had to go through it, and I still had to hire my own psychiatrist to prove the opposite side and everything. And this was just done by Skip Miller's office as a way of wasting taxpayer money, in a way of intimidating me and my family and trying to stop me from going through with this process.
It's unbelievable. You mean you were forced by a court order to see a psychiatrist ahead of time?
Yeah, to be examined by a psychiatrist.
For claiming a recovery of a property.
That's right. That's right.
You couldn't get your lawyers to get that turned
The only
down?
way I could do it was by going through with the examination and proving that it was false.
God.
That's how ridiculous this system is.
I think just hearing you say this, you've basically answered a question that I had, that being, what would be gained by the city for drawing this out a second round instead of just settling with you?
Well, exactly, and they've never even offered a settlement. I might have gone away for 3 rolls of film if they and an apology if they had asked. But instead, because this guy Skip Miller has no motivation to have this thing settled, every time he goes to them and he says, "Hey, we're going to win. You can't let this guy win. If he wins," the other thing is, if we had won, it would have changed the law in terms of how they handle evidence. They would have had to actually ask your permission to take something out of your house. They couldn't just come and grab it. They would have had to take care of it, and they would have had to give it back to you. And if they didn't, they would have had to pay you back the value of it. And up until now, the LAPD does not have that restriction on them. And this was evident, right after the riots here in Los Angeles. The police went door to door confiscating videotapes and still pictures that people had taken of people during the riots. And they wanted to use this stuff so that they could get, people who were looters and ruffians on the street and put them behind bars. But they went door to door confiscating this stuff with no warrants, just taking this away from people. And, it's one thing if you come to my door and you say, "Hey, you have some evidence here we could use in trial. Can we give you a receipt for it? Can we borrow it, make a copy of it, and give it right back to you?" That's one thing. But to come in and say, "Give us your film, give us your scrapbooks, give us your personal stuff, we're going to use it in trial," is absolutely, against everything, that I was raised with in this country in terms of, right to privacy.
So in that case, did the jury make recommendations, like sometimes they do, meaning that the LA police is going to have to be responsible?
Exactly. As a result of our trial, the statute would have been changed in terms of standard of care, which now is that the LAPD has a slight standard of care. What does slight mean? They throw it in the trunk of the car, and maybe it's there when we, get to the station. It would have elevated that standard of care to reasonable. In other words, they would have had to take care of it, give you a receipt for it, and make an effort to return it to you and store it, in a locked up fashion. And so that was one of the reasons why all this weight came down on my trial, was that we have to defeat this guy. If this guy opens this door, this is going to, create this is going to shackle the police department in terms of their being able to investigate, crime here in Los Angeles, just because you'd have to ask, somebody's, permission before you knock down their door and take their, their scrapbooks and home videos.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that there is evidence in your trial that Bobby Kennedy was killed by someone other than Sirhan, and you had photographic evidence of that, and they would stop at any length. Because what you're saying about the changing of the law in LA County, about how they handle evidence, that wouldn't explain that all the records of your trial being stolen.
That's right. Exactly.
So there's one way to look at it in an apologist's point of view, saying, well, we had to bring this weight down because we don't want we don't want to handcuff our policemen for making their illegal searches, right?
Right.
But, and give people a basic right of, like you say, a receipt. So if somebody does have a videotape of something, they want it for the news, or they want to put their hands on it. But I think it's a deeper I can't think of the right word, but subversive.
Oh yeah, an effort to silence, and that's really what came through in this trial is, that they don't want, a citizen speaking out like this. They don't want me to have this venue, this right. It was a very offensive process, once, Skip Miller and the city, turned their tack toward me personally as opposed to just dealing with this as a, simple property case. They towed my car away out of my driveway, and they didn't return it. They lost it. It's a very expensive car, so pay me for it. Instead, it turned into this personal attack on me and whether or not I was a photographer and all these other things. That ends up just bleeding me and the city dry of money and accomplishing nothing. The other thing is they got the press banned from our trial. Court TV wanted to cover this. There was all kinds of news coverage, and they got the press thrown out of the courtroom. We came in right after the OJ trial. And so they threw the press out of our trial, and so we had only very limited press coverage. People were allowed in there basically with a pencil and a paper to cover this trial, and all media now is pretty much electronic or at least audio. And so they banned all of that from our trial. And, that was ridiculous. If we go back in a second time, it will not be banned. We've already talked to Court TV and a number of other people that want to cover this trial so that the people see what's going on, behind closed doors.
What was the excuse for banning? Was it just the OJ thing?
Because of all the fallout that had happened with the O.J. Simpson trial. They claimed that they would have to sequester the jury, and they couldn't, they would tape the jury pool and all this other stuff. All that's been overturned, since then. But because of all the furor, following the OJ thing with everybody camping downtown and everything, we lost a lot of ground there. And yeah, exactly, it's absurd. The press was thrown out.
I was under the impression that 2 weeks ago that something was up. So
they've offered, they're offering, settlement. They want to go into. We have a judge who is a pro-settlement judge, and he would like us to negotiate. So things are going on between the attorneys and between the city right now as we speak in terms of whether or not they're going to come to us with a reasonable settlement that doesn't include gagging me, saying that I can't speak about this or I can't write about this. And I don't want to put the city through another trial. I don't want to put the city through the expense of it. I don't want to put my family through this or, have to put my friends and
I wouldn't worry about the city's expense because it seemed like they didn't care about it at all.
Exactly. They didn't care about it at all. But I do, as a taxpayer. I don't want to see them run up, another $1 million, $2 million behind the scenes. If this was out in the open and everyone could see what was going on, that would be one thing. But to just have this behind the scenes, money machine, running the tab on both the city and myself and no information getting out, I'll fight this thing in the press like I have before. And that's what I told them. I said, this second trial will be about Rampart Station, which is where this took place. And this will be about Skip Miller, who was found guilty by the bar of illegal contact with a juror. This is going to be a much bigger case than just whether or not they lost my film. It'll be about film being stolen. It'll be about court records being stolen. And I'll try this on the courthouse steps if I have to, no matter how much they gag me behind closed doors.
I'm going to pause it right there, ladies and gentlemen, because we got the break sneaking up on us. Why would they go to these lengths? Wonder what Scott's film showed. Alright, we are back. For time purposes, let's get right back into it. RFK Assassination witness Scott Enyart.
It must be very hard for an average citizen to go after justice in this. I mean, these trials cost a lot of money, even if you don't have the super high-priced lawyer.
That's right. I've been fortunate, and I've had the resources, and I've had a lot of friends and attorneys that have come forward here, and political activists, guys like Paul Schrade and stuff. Ted Chirac and Paul Schrade, who've come forward to help me with this. And so I've been able to muster a lot of forces behind me. But to do this again, with just to know we're going to go back, and if we go back to the appeals court, we go back before the same three judges that threw us out the first time. It automatically goes back before those same guys.
There seems to be something wrong with that.
Yeah, there's something seriously wrong with that system.
Well, maybe that's what you need to get out in public.
That's right. So I'll be fighting this, like I am on your show, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on here because these are the forums in which we really get the points across. I'm not gagged by my attorneys or the judge telling me I can't talk about this, that, or the other thing. We get to bring out all the issues, and the public gets to decide. The public is not stupid, and that's the way we're treated. We're treated like we're idiots, like we're children, and that we're not capable of handling this information. And we certainly are, and we're capable of, after all these years, and we're entitled to a review of what happened that night, to review of this evidence before everybody is dead. I was 15 years old at the time, so, we've lost 4 or 5 witnesses who were there that night in the pantry there. And so before all this evidence and before all these people disappear, we're entitled to a clean airing of this and just get the information out there. I've never, claimed, conspiracy or 10 bullets, this other thing. I just want the facts out there. Let the people decide, for themselves, come to whatever decisions they want to on this, but we are entitled to that information. And now with, internet and so many more people out there, investigative reporters, people like you doing a job like this, we're going to get that information out there to the public where it belongs.
Well, as hard as it's been on you in a court of public opinion, this sort of case makes a big difference. It might not get into the mainstream media, but people take an interest when leaders are assassinated, and that doesn't die down in just a couple of years.
Well, that's what I found, and it's been very encouraging when, people like you call me up or, people will stop me in the courthouse and say, I've been following this case, because it takes tremendous effort, to go out and research something like this. It doesn't show up on the cover of the Los Angeles Times. You got to dig for this stuff. You've got to find, people like you on the air, or these little journals that come out, or go on the internet, or go research the archives yourselves to really get the information and make up, make up your mind for yourselves what's taking place here.
Now, you mentioned that you had the coroner, Thomas Noguchi, on the stand.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us what he had to say about the gunshot wounds?
Well, Thomas Noguchi stated that these were contact wounds, and that he was not satisfied that they had come from Sirhan's gun, and that had he had my photographs, they could have entirely changed the results of his autopsy report. He would have had the information of what took place behind Robert Kennedy during the shooting, and when all 3 bullet wounds entered from behind Bobby Kennedy, he said that this information would have been really the basis for bullet trajectories and who was where and firing what and at what height and what distance in this case. And so he was adamant in saying that had he had access to these photographs, this could have very well changed the outcome. He would have had that much more information to add to his autopsy report.
And as I understand, there's a lawyer fighting for a new trial for Sirhan right now.
That's right. Lawrence Teeter has been battling away, and we've given them access to a lot of our court files and things, and vice versa. They've fed us a lot of information. They have Lynn Mangan, who is a tremendous researcher who's done a lot of just real good research going up there to the California State Archives. She discovered this evidence being opened up, numbers 24 and 25, evidence being moved from one book to another. She would go up there and photograph the logbook, and then go up there a couple of years later, open up that same logbook and photograph it, and it had been changed. Here's something in the California State Archives from the LAPD, and all of a sudden someone's going up there and altering this evidence. It's just been absolutely shocking. So there's a tremendous amount of stuff. There's no doubt that Sirhan walked in there and emptied his gun. How he got there, why he was there, whether he was hypnotized or not, whether or not his gun fired the bullet that actually killed him. These are huge questions.
I agree with Scott. Those are huge questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. When we get back, more with RFK assassination witness Scott Enyart. Don't go anywhere. Going back in time for this one. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. 2 segments left. Let's get right back into it with RFK assassination witness Scott Enyart.
You may have some guy in there who's, certainly he's guilty of going in there and starting this whole thing, but he didn't kill the guy. Maybe he didn't fire the bullet that killed Bobby Kennedy. Maybe none of the bullets he fired hit anybody. The point is we just don't know right now. And so it's a tremendous injustice. I'm not out to free anybody. but I'm out there to free our minds and to find out what information is there, and then whatever happens, happens.
Well, I think one telling tale of when you talk about being hypnotized is that Sirhan has no memory, I think, up until this day, of really what happened.
And that's an important thing because, you know, Sirhan would sell out anybody to get out of jail. This guy's pretty unhappy. If he could remember anything and go, hey, that guy did this, that guy did that, and he could get a little chunk knocked off his jail time, he would do it. He desperately wants out of jail. So in that sense, you know, I have to admit he has some credibility when he says, I don't remember, because this guy would turn in anybody to get out of jail. That's
pretty amazing. And there hasn't been any press, really, about that effort.
Right.
You mentioned his lawyer, or legal team. I forget. Did you say it was actually his lawyer?
Oh, Lawrence Teeter.
Yeah.
Is the lawyer who's handling the case. Well, the press stays away from it. Los Angeles Times, you know, we've got a one newspaper town here. And everybody, you know, other than that, you watch, you know, 2, 4, and 7, maybe Channel 11 for a little bit of video news. People don't dig deep for that, and that's why radio news, and that's why a lot of these alternative journals and things like that really make a huge difference when you get into these deep political issues that aren't, you know, the eye candy of the day. You know, they're not the, you know, I turn on the news today and it's another, you know, guy outrunning the police, you know, for 45 minutes instead of sitting down there and analyzing some hard-hitting story that affects all of us, like, you know, who's killing our leaders.
Yeah, or completely subverting the justice system.
That's right. That's right. Instead, we're distracted by, you know, bright, shiny objects here like a bunch of squirrels. You know, the people here, you know, are deserve a great deal more here. The people out here and the generations, I've got kids now in college, and their level of understanding and their level of research that they demand before they make a decision on something is such a higher standard than there was when I was a kid. That it really hurts me to see the media pandering to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, especially the lying that you see.
Yeah.
I mean, today the recent news is what they think the flight, TWA Flight 800,
right,
is now some kind of fuel tank.
Right.
And there's all sorts of people that are calling out for, none of the eyewitnesses were called to testify.
Yeah.
And I think there's over 50. And there's, I think, a Commander Donaldson, a few other people. I mean, I won't get into that whole...
That's right. What are they afraid of?
Yeah. The thing is that they're so used to getting away with it, and they've been able to pull the wool over our eyes that when you know, Ted Turner sold out CNN to that conglomerate that bought it, and that was the last time they had any independent news reporting.
Right.
And they've totally, I think, as April Oliver had mentioned, that it's been confirmed that I think, don't quote me on this, but I think 80 people from the
I think it was 30
people from you know, black operations were in there in the newsroom doing training on how to color the news.
Right. No, we're in the midst of a very quiet revolution, you know, and you know, what you're doing here on the internet and the small radio stations and, you know, the independent, you know, magazines, the zines that are coming out and everything. This is really the future. You know, they can't control information. They really can't put a cap on it here. And as much as, you know, MP3 files, you know, are stealing copywritten music, at the same time, that same types of technology, when you apply it to news groups or to transferring information or immediate response from the scene, from people who really know what's going on, real witnesses and stuff, I think that, you know, we're on the verge of something, you know, tremendous here in terms of liberation, in terms of information being taken out of the hands of the big publishers and the big networks and being put in the hands of people who can, you know, sit, you know, literally in their garage and you know, and disseminate news.
Oh, you've seen our studio. Well, you know, I'd love to agree with you, except that what we're up against is a very well-financed machinery, and it takes people doing low-key. I mean, if we had a little wireless station, you would call this, you know, pirate radio or something, transmitting to, you know, 12 watts. Luckily, we're able to broadcast, and but even better, we're able to archive the shows.
Yes.
So when we may have a limit of how many people can log on at one time, that we don't have any limit of how many people can listen to archived shows.
That's right. Scroll it away, and, you know, it's like Fahrenheit 451. You know, everybody memorize a book.
Yeah.
Well, I do have to agree with you. I think that that actually the information age that's coming on us right now is probably taking a lot of people by surprise. I know for myself and Len and for a lot of people around here who are more into the computers, we were into this years ago, and I know I couldn't have foreseen how fast it would grow and how quickly information would change hands.
Well, and what's terrific is the older generation, and I'm talking about the generation above me and me to a certain degree, the fact that I don't understand it is tremendous, because so much gets done, under my nose and under the nose of the old establishment that by the time that this thing is out there and wired up and everybody's on it, they won't even know what hit them.
Exactly. I'm very optimistic about that myself.
Yeah.
We have some gloomy topics on here, but the bottom line is the information gets out and people are aware, and that's what makes change.
The information sets you free.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully. But another reason is that, there is a few people that I've wanted to speak to, and you were one of them, and I don't see any news coverage, I don't see anything, so it's been up to me actually to go out and make a call and say, can I talk to you on the air,
right.
And, on the same token, I'd love to talk to William Pepper, who just did the Martin Luther King trial in Memphis, and once again, I'm scouring the Internet, and I can't find any articles. I find one or two kind of rather uncomplimentary articles from Memphis. And, of course, there's this famous Gerald Posner, right?
Sure.
I hate even bringing his name up. So, Poisner, I should call him. But, on this, topic of film and the Robert Kennedy assassination, I think the only conclusion that I draw is that they're worried about uncovering what really went on and making that, even more in the mainstream.
Right.
And with that, have you ever been approached by Oliver Stone at all?
Oliver Stone has kept track of what we were doing through the whole thing because JFK was produced during the prep time during our trial. And so we've been able to get documents back and forth between, and they've fed us a number of documents and things. So, that's all a real closed circuit. I've been approached by many people to do books and TV movies and things like that, and I've always, wanted to keep this trial a very pure thing. I've never taken a dime for an interview or the use of a photo or anything like that. Until this thing finally concludes, you won't be seeing, a movie or a book or anything like that until we wind through the courts and come to a reasonable conclusion. Once that happens, then we'll probably go to that next step, starting with I've been taking notes, obviously my journals and things, for a book, and we'll see what happens from there. But, I want to be very careful about this, in that, exploiting somebody's death, for profit has always been a very ugly thing, and there's a very fine line that you have to tread there. In terms of whether or not it's worthwhile to get that information out. And you get someone like Oliver Stone who has at least a background and at least a strong, political point of view and a certain purity to it, whether you agree with him or not, has that certain power to get that message across. And so if I find that kind of a medium and it's not exploitative, then we might take that to another level.
Right, because you had mentioned you had been approached by Court TV.
That's right.
So is that something that you would get, if they did cover the trial, you would get any compensation?
No, we'd get no compensation at all.
So
basically,
it's got to be costing your side hundreds of thousands of dollars, though.
Well, Court TV comes in there, and then they basically put their cameras in and they cover the trial. The cost to me is the cost of putting on another offensive. And so whether or not that's worthwhile, we've already won our jury trial. Whether or not we want to do that, and whether or not we want to cause the city to cough up that much money in their absurd defense of it, we'll just have to see if that's the best forum for it. Sometimes, the best forum for it now is on the radio with guys like you, or maybe in book form, and that's what I'm having to mull over now at this point in my life. I've put a quarter of a century into this battle. It's time for me to sort of wrap this thing up and move on to the next one.
Right, but saying that, I think that if you did have financial resources behind you, if we made this a little more public, I think there's a lot of people that would be surprised and actually want to know what had been going on, especially in your case when you have firsthand evidence of mistreatment of something as simple as just, like you say, wanting your film back,
right,
to turning into personal attacks psychiatric reviews, and on and on. I mean, you must have more stories that you want to talk about.
Yeah, no, in that sense, you haven't heard the last of me yet. Whether or not the best forum for that is another trial or something else, that's what I've got to figure out. We're just reining everything in now, and looking at the damage that this has caused, and the emotional turmoil that this has put all of my family through and everything. My wife, who she was my girlfriend at the time this thing happened. We've been together since we were 13 years old. And I didn't put her on the stand in the first trial, and she's all, ready to go now in the second trial, going, "Hey, put me up there. I want to,
Oh, that's great that you have support.
I want to let these guys know what really happened, type of a thing. But that's exactly what I don't want. I don't want to drag my family into this and stuff.
Well, there's other people like Jim Garrison and other
you saw through that, what a toll this takes, and when we're watching that movie, that was hard for me because I became this monster in my house. Obsessed with these other things, these bigger issues, and the main thing is to let something like that be affecting how your family moves forward over that amount of time. It's a big sacrifice. You got to be careful.
I mean, you could debate that. I would say that really it should be worth it. You're trying.
Well, that's the thing is it's been worth it so far.
Yeah.
And so now, do I want to, wind up and do this thing again at this point in my life? That's why I've got to say, gee, maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe it's a book. Maybe it's a movie. I don't know if it's necessarily the arena of the courtroom where all the benefits are on their side because they have unlimited resources and attorneys ready to go. Is that where I want to fight this battle?
And I'm going to pause it right there, ladies and gentlemen, because it goes on to the third section. Now, for time purposes, I'm not going to be able to air the third segment, but I suggest you go over to Len's site, like I said, Black Op Radio, blackopradio.com, and you can get his full archives there, and you can listen to the full interview with Scott. Do a little more research. I'll give out some information on the other side of the break about where you can do a little bit more research and some other things, some books to look up, some documentaries to start with, some other shows, even things that Mae Brussel herself did, 30 years ago. I'm going to give out a bunch of information so you can go research for yourself more on the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, because it's something that many people don't even know about. Who's RFK, Popeye? That's why the whole point of tonight's broadcast was to get you inspired to look into the assassination of RFK. Now, I could have come on, and I've done shows before, and I'll do more again where I come on and pontificate about all the different things, the evidence here and there, but I wanted to let you actually listen to a witness, someone who's been through the ringer, all for some photographs that he took. That's all this all originally started with, was he wanted his photographs back, and he got put through the ringer. You gotta wonder why. I mean, seriously, what did they have to hide? Oh, their negligence. I doubt it. I don't think they would go that far to hide negligence. I think there was more to it. To look into why. Why? It's odd. Time to pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're going to break. Don't go anywhere when we get back. Final segment. Research resources to do further research on the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. Something that's not as talked about as the assassination of his brother, John F. Kennedy, the former president. Remember, Bobby also was the attorney general under his brother, and then he was going to run for president and change things, and they killed him. Anyway, I'm going to give you 3 books. RFK Must Die by Robert Blair Kaiser. Who Killed Bobby? The Unsolved Murder of Robert F. Kennedy by Shane O'Sullivan. And that is a companion book that goes along with the movie titled RFK Must Die that Shane made, which you need to go check into, and I'll tell you about. But again, his book, Shane's book that goes along with the movie, is titled Who Killed Bobby? The Unsolved Murder of Robert F. Kennedy. And then the other book I would recommend that you read, The Assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, The Conspiracy and Cover-Up, William Turner, and John Christensen. Now, those are just three to start off with, and I'm not saying I agree with everything that, like, say, Kaiser wrote, or maybe every, their own personal take on things, we'll say. But I have to go back, and I really want to, because I've skimmed through all three of them, as I do with I do with all of my books. I skim through them fast, and then I go back and I read them about 2 or 3 more times, in depth, paying more close attention. It's just the way I read. It's almost like speed reading, but it's my own little demented way of doing it. It's something I've been doing since I was a kid. I can read like a 300-page book in a day. I could skim through it and retain I would say about 65% of what I saw, and then I'll go back and I have to reread it to get details and stuff. But anyway, I skimmed through Kaiser's book, and I want to actually go back and read it again and look into it deeper. So I can't say that if they came to any conclusions here or there. I've seen O'Sullivan's stuff already, and I've actually seen his film, which is called RFK Must Die. His movie, the information that's in that film and that's in the book that goes along with it, the companion book, it just blows you away. If you don't know anything about the RFK assassination, you will after you watch that. And then, as I said, the other book by Turner and Christensen. There was one other thing. Oh, the JFK assassination page, research page that I have on federaljack.com. Federaljack.com. I guess it's a backslash. I always say /. I'm not sure. It's the one that slants to where the top half is slanted to the right side. I guess that's a / maybe. Whatever. Federaljack.com. Whatever / JFK. And if you put that in, it'll bring up the old school 1995 style directory listing page that I created over on Federal Jack. And if you look at it, if you scroll down to the R section, there's a bunch of stuff on Bobby Kennedy's murder. It all says RFK, whatever, assassination, blah, 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 blah. Scroll down there, and then under the May Brussels stuff, if you look about halfway through the middle of it, you'll see one that says guest Ted Chirac, filmmaker of The Second Gun, who really killed RFK. Ted's movie, he interviews Scott Enyart. You see him when he was really young. He interviews him about what happened, and he goes into how the details about how they lost evidence. I mean, the ceiling tiles are gone. The ceiling tiles down there, gone. How do you lose evidence in an assassination? How do you, of a politician, a man who's running for president in the middle of the presidential run? How do you just, we lost the evidence. Things happen. Well, anyway, go watch the movie. It's called The Second Gun. It's an old film by Ted Chirac. And also, let me give you the date on that. It's August 4th, 1975. So you can download the MP3 of the May Brussels show with Ted Chirac there. It's guest Ted Chirac, filmmaker of The Second Gun. And then also, if you scroll down towards the bottom of the May Brussels archive page, you'll see it says RFK Assassination, October 20th, 1971. That's another good broadcast. But then you can, the whole page is JFK stuff too, but you'll see there's a whole section dedicated to Bobby's murder there with a bunch of videos and some information. And then go read the books, go read articles written, go check out what William Pepper has to say about Sirhan. Watch the movie RFK Must Die. Watch Chirac's movie, The Second Gun. I'm telling you, when you watch Shane's movie, the RFK Must Die, it's going to blow you away. The amount of stuff that's out there. And wait till you see the connections with CIA operatives to the JFK assassination. I couldn't make this up if I was an award-winning writer or filmmaker for Hollywood. I really couldn't, ladies and gentlemen. Go check it out. All right, we're out of time. I hope I've sparked an interest in your brain to go research this. See you all again live tomorrow night. I love you all. I'm out of here.